If I told you that glass cups are alive, you would laugh, right? But what if I told you that your life is made of the exact same thing? A man was watching a video. The video said, "Scientists say we're just made of chemicals. But then why is it that when someone dies, even if their body looks perfectly fine, you can't bring them back? How can we humans, who feel, love, and understand, be made of the same stuff as rocks, glass, and metals?" The answer is clear. Life is the soul that God gave us. When that soul leaves the body, life ends. It's something science can never explain. The man thought to himself, "Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe life really is a soul." Just then, his daughter walked in and said, "Dad, my cup just died." He said, "It died?" She said, "It fell and broke. I know it wasn't alive, but I really feel like it was. It just split into two pieces. But when I try to push the pieces back together, it never becomes what it was before. It really feels like it died." The man said, "There's a microscopic structure in the glass that we can't see. When it breaks, that structure is disrupted, so simply putting the pieces back together won't fix it. It looks the same, but something in its structure is gone." Then he remembered the video. He thought, what if life is like that too? What if nothing leaves the body and something simply stops working? But isn't life something more? So he went to a friend of his, a biology professor, and asked, "Why is it that when someone dies, even if all their organs seem fine, they can't come back? Doesn't that mean that there was a soul that left the body?" The professor said, "When a body dies, biological processes, especially metabolism, stop. Right then, the underlying chemical organization that supports those processes breaks down. So the body looking intact doesn't really matter. The truth is that life is not a thing. Life is a dynamic process, something that's constantly happening. A process that depends on an extremely precise chemical and microscopic organization, which is in turn shaped and maintained by the process itself." The man asked, "What exactly is life? What makes us different from rocks and glass?" He replied, "No one has found a precise definition of life yet. But if you look closely at any living thing, what you find are physical and chemical processes. Still, most living systems share key features, such as metabolism, the ability to reproduce, and some kind of boundary, such as a membrane." The man asked, "What's metabolism?" He said, "It's the process by which the body extracts energy from food and uses it to maintain and grow. There's evidence suggesting that before life began, metabolism, reproduction, and membranes may have emerged separately in natural chemical cycles." The man asked, "So even lifeless chemicals can reproduce?" He said, "Yes, there are molecules that can, under certain conditions, trigger processes that produce copies of themselves. This has been observed in laboratory experiments." The man said, "What about metabolism? How can chemicals do that?" He replied, "Metabolism requires an energy source. In places like ocean floor hydrothermal vents, both energy and chemical compounds are available, so energy-rich molecules can form naturally. Then more complex chemical structures can use that energy to grow and replicate. There's experimental and natural evidence supporting many of these steps." The man asked, "And how did membranes appear?" He replied, "There are chemical compounds called fatty acids. They can spontaneously form double-layer membranes in water under the right conditions. Fatty acids can form naturally, and they have even been found in meteorites." The man asked, "When did the first life form appear?" He replied, "Researchers believe that life on Earth first appeared about 3.5 billion years ago." The man asked, "Where did life begin?" He replied, "There are at least two places where this could have happened: deep-sea hydrothermal vents and shallow surface pools." The man said, "What happened exactly?" He said, "No one knows for sure, but there are suggested scenarios. One is that after a membrane formed, it could have trapped a metabolic process and a self-replicating molecule inside. This could have been the starting point for early cells. At this stage, we still wouldn't call it a living cell, but it was likely a precursor to the first true cells. In other words, the earliest ancestors of life were probably nothing more than non-living chemical structures." The man said, "But I still think this scenario is very unlikely." He replied, "I wish I could agree with you, because evolution can turn even unlikely events into enormous outcomes. However, this scenario is considered plausible by many researchers." The man said, "How can evolution turn unlikely events into enormous outcomes?" He said, "When a system has enough material, energy, and time, even highly improbable events may eventually happen. especially in the case of a self-replicating cell. Such an organism only needs to emerge once. From there, it can spread, evolve, populate an entire planet, and pave the way for the continuation of the process in even more improbable directions. What we're talking about here is far simpler than even the simplest cells we know today. Much simpler than modern bacteria. And yet, even at this level, you can see how the groundwork for life can form naturally, without any need for a soul or any supernatural design. However, there are also other scenarios, but they are less likely. For example, one is that the first foundations of life may have arrived on Earth from another planet by meteorites. The man said, "So, our life is really made of a bunch of chemicals, just like glass and stone." He said, "What if I told you that not just life, but love, awareness, emotion, and consciousness all come from the same foundation too? Would you want to hear the rest of the amazing story of life?" The man said, "Yes, but now I have two important questions. First, if life emerged naturally and without any plan, then why didn't completely different forms of life emerge as well? Why do we only have one kind of life, based on carbon, proteins, and DNA? And second, if our lives are ultimately built from physics and chemistry, then what really happens to us when we die? I need to think about it, but I'll come back soon."